Today in Agronomy on KFIL AM 1060 with Pioneer Field Agronomist Allie Wise and Josh Schaffner. Here's Josh and Allie.
Good morning, Southeast Minnesota. It's January 6, 2021, and this is episode 54. Allie, we're back here for the first show of the year after a little bit of a break here through the holidays. Beautiful weather here still, but kind of shifting gears. Nice to wrap up the year and get 2020 behind us. And now we get to look forward to really preparing for the 2021 crop. And to kind of kick off the year here, Allie, it just feels a lot different. Even if you think of a year ago now, or even through the early part of the growing season last year, commodity prices have changed a lot. The outlook looks a little bit different. And I think overall, the approach to this crop is going to look a little bit different than it did a year ago.
Yeah, and it does feel like kind of a key factor to that is just, you talked about the beautiful weather we've been given here, and that's obviously a huge factor. You look at this fall and the amount of work that we were actually able to get done this year compared to the last several years is going to be huge as we move into 2021. In years past, it seemed like we've just had all these compounding factors working against us, but now having room to work through some of those, like I said, as we move into 2021, I think that's really going to be one of the key factors that allows us, kind of like you pointed out, to really look at maybe how can we maximize yield versus in the past, we maybe had some other things we needed to focus on before we could get to the point of truly reaching that potential. Any kind of thoughts on that thought process?
Yeah, I think as we've sat down with growers, maybe the last two seasons, we've really had to sharpen the pencil and really take a look at, where have we been spending input dollars and are there opportunities to be a little more efficient with those dollars? I think back to, maybe the previous really big run in the commodity markets, we weren't really afraid to kind of throw everything at a crop. And then we had to kind of take a step back and really look at, okay, what's giving us good return on investment? What can we maybe save a little bit here? And I don't think we're going to go back to just throwing the kitchen sink at it. I think we've learned some things through the past that's maybe just not the absolute right way to do it. However, I think you talked about last fall a little bit. If I look at fall fertilization, I think percentage wise, we got a lot more done than we have in the past. In most cases, as I worked with producers, we increased our rates of P&K, which I think is going to be rewarded as we get into the 2021 crop. And you also pair that with so much more tillage done. The last couple of falls, we've been behind the 8 ball on that, which can really lead to challenges in the spring from having to get tillage done, getting planting done on time, and also to some of the yield drags we fight with spring tillage and not having residue breakdown where it needs to be. But we're set up so good, Allie, and I think growers and I know I'm excited about starting to plan out this crop and really getting into some farm plans and getting hybrids placed and VRS stuff figured out. And I think it'll be an interesting year, but it's just going to be a little bit different approach in a good way, which I think will be a lot of fun. And just kind of looking forward to setting up the shows here and kind of going month by month and going through the process of getting ready for this next crop.
Yeah, there's certainly going to be a lot to talk about. And I think, like you said, we're finally getting ahead of things, which I think is going to set us up nice for this 2021 growing season. I think, not to be the pessimist here, but one factor that I think myself and other folks do have on their mind is just maybe where we sit from a moisture perspective. Obviously, we've got a lot of time to come before we get to that planning window to see if we can catch up on where we're sitting currently, moisture-wise, soil profile. But I think from a maybe a more positive perspective, you look at the amount of moisture we've had these past years rolling into the planting season, flushing out some of the nitrogen, and that certainly played a big effect. Maybe ultimately this will end up being a positive thing. I'm not sure. But I think if I look at the one gray area in my mind, that might be one of those factors that I'm still watching closely, as is everyone, but unfortunately, that's something that's out of our control, unlike the other things we've mentioned on the show today.
Yeah, it has a feel that and this can all change, but the drier conditions this fall, and we haven't had a significant amount of snowfall or precipitation. I haven't looked at the month by month, but it's been very minimal, really since October 1st of the moisture. And temperature wise, I was, with the lack of snow, we talked a lot about corn rootworm. I was kind of hoping we could get a major cold snap here in January that could maybe help that cause. At this point, we haven't even been below zero hardly at all this winter. So likely not making any progress. Still a long ways to go this winter. That can change. But looking at the 15-day, it looks to continue to be dry, and I don't see any major deep freezes there. And it just seems like sometimes when you come into a fall dry like this and you stay this mild, and if we do stay mild through January, it seems like more times than not that can kind of lead to a drier spring, but that can all change in a heartbeat. We've seen that go both ways, but yeah, I do agree that the soil moisture thing is front and center. And I know some guys that were doing some digging or maybe digging foundations for bins this fall. Wasn't a lot of moisture down there, so the subsoil moisture has been depleted, following by some record rainfall years. But it seems like the law of averages has kicked in, and now we're kind of going the other direction. But time will tell, and not a lot we can do to prepare for that at this point. Maybe something we'll think about come spring, but it'll be something we're all thinking about as we get ready for this next crop.
So these are some of the things that we look at as we maybe approach 2021 that have worked in our favor. As we move into segment 2, we're just going to talk about some other factors that we think will be interesting to watch between now and planting season. Welcome back, listeners. So in the first segment, Josh, we talked about, all the things that are working in our favor as we move into 2021, really focusing on the fact that, this should allow us a really nice opportunity to think about how we can maximize yield in 2021 during the growing season. But as we think about segment 2, I think, there's always these things that we're maybe intrigued to really keep an eye on as we between now and the growing season. And, you look at, there's been a lot of headlines often of, farmers going to be planting more soybeans? What are some of these crop rotations going to be looking like? But I think, overall, I kind of maybe stole your fire on what you're most intrigued about. But what are you most intrigued about as we maybe think about this 2021 crop?
Yeah, it's sitting here today. I think even at the macro level, across the corn belt, the corn soybean shift is a conversation, and with the commodity prices, really changing at a rapid rate, is beans are really getting up there, looking pretty attractive. Corn is definitely creeping right up there with it, and I'm extremely curious about what that's going to look like, and been getting a lot of questions about as we set up growers' plans, what should we be doing, more corn, more beans, and there's a lot of ways to look at that. In some cases, we talked a little bit about it last year, and even some of the last episodes we talked about we're maybe seeing a little bit of shift to more rotated acres to beans, strictly for some pest management to control corn rootworm. However, some cases, depending on where commodity prices go here, we could see some changes to that. And one thing, Allie, I always like to look at as I talk to producers is, we can look at our yield goals, we can look at the commodity prices and say, hey, this looks better. But I always like to take it a step back and look at, okay, what are the risks? What are the historics here? And one thing that's kind of fun to look at, where we have a lot of replicated data from our plots, Allie, is just looking at maybe the variability of crops. And just for example, I'm gonna start with corn here just to set this up. If we look at let's just say we take 2020, which in our replicated trials averaged 241.8, the previous 3 years averaged 227. So we look at, there's about a 9% swing there. Now on the flip side, if we look at beans, Allie, if we look at the previous 3 years to 2020, so if we look at from 2017 to 2019, there was about a 15% swing. So we had an average of 62 bushel the previous 3 years. This year we're 70.9, which you look at that yield, you look at the bean run, beans looked really attractive. However, as we look forward, just looking at risk management and volatility, our data would suggest there's still potentially a lot more volatility in a soybean crop compared to a corn crop.
And I just, like you said, there's a lot of different ways that folks can look at this. And that's why I think it is intriguing to watch this as we move into any planting season, really, because, we talked about the market incentives and how that can drive some folks' rotations. I think the pest management, like you said, is huge. A lot of folks, just in our conversations with customers, just having that sense of folks maybe going back to a 50-50 rotation just to hedge themselves a little bit more positively. But I think it's the volatility piece of a crop that, as you outlined those numbers, it's just intriguing to look at, from a consistency standpoint. And, if we were to start placing bets, just that corn leaning in that favor just a little bit more consistently. As we look at between now and then, any other just one-off factors that you think are going to drive some of this?
Maybe a few things. I sometimes think about, we talked in the previous segment about we're trending a little bit dry. And I always think about this too. if I think back historically, if you just look at springs that dry out early and we hit the field early, it was just really common that if things are going good, we're planting in April. Is the calendar still in April for wrapping up corn? It's like, hey, I'm just going to plant another 100 acres of corn. It's so early. The weather's so good. We're going to keep going. And in some cases today, I almost think that that's not the case so much, where you look at, we push planting beans so early. And I think one of the biggest ways to minimize that 15% swing in that variability of soybean is planting date. So in some cases, regardless of what the spring does, as you set your plan, I'm going to really encourage guys to just execute the plan, and just try to get both crops in as early as possible to try to minimize that risk. And the other thing, I just want to rewind and look at that data one other way. I talked about the 15% swing of variability of beans, the 9% in corn. Just to put that in a bushel perspective on soybeans, the previous 3 years averaged almost 9 bushel less than this year. So if you look at some current commodity prices, that's $100 an acre swing. That if we go back to the previous 3-year average, the gross income on beans could be $100 less. If we look at that at corn, if we went back to the previous 3 average, it's only a $60 per acre swing. So just one other way to, as you're looking at these things and setting numbers, 70 bushel beans look really attractive. 60 bushel beans might really change what that looks like a little bit. But it's just a few things as you're really trying to pencil that out and looking at historics, page 4 and 5 of our agronomy summary book, and have you go back and maybe look at some hard data of what can these yield swings look like, what can we expect through that. And I always like to look at minimizing risk and understanding the risk of each crop, and just a really unique way to look at some of the data and try to make some decisions for next year.
You've been listening to Today in Agronomy on KFIL AM 1060. If you've missed part of the show or want to hear more, check out the show page at kfilradio.com or with the 103.1 KFIL app. Stay connected with Allie and Josh on Twitter. It's at Allie Gwise, WISE, and at Josh Schaffner to submit your questions for the show. Tune in next Wednesday for the next Today in Agronomy on KFIL AM 1060. We'll see you at 11 a.m.